This week we're going to be proofing luring or targeting depending on what you use. If you use both, you can proof for both, or just choose one to work on per week. But the point of this is that most people train luring and targeting as a behavior, and then they're like, yeah, my dog gets it, and then they start training behaviors using luring and targeting, but don't maintain it as if the luring or the targeting is a behavior in itself. So this week we're going to go over 3 steps to making sure that your dog's luring or targeting skills are very strong. And the reason this is important is that when you're training a new behavior and your dog's luring and targeting skills aren't strong, things can start to fall apart. Your dog can get overexcited, feel frustrated, or suddenly become disinterested when training. But when you have a strong foundation of a behavior of luring or targeting that you're using, then you're going to have more success with adding criteria when creating this new behavior.
Step 1. Correct arousal, correct distance.
Step 1. Getting the correct level of arousal and teaching the dog to follow the lure or the target from the correct distance. So if you have a dog that licks or tries to bite your treat when you're luring, or your fingers when you're luring, or the target, you're going to click before the dog reaches the target. So as they go towards the target, click and treat. And you can see he's taking the treats too hard. So I'm going to put the treats down on the ground instead. If you have a dog that's really overexcited about food, use a very low value food at first. So something the dog doesn't particularly like. Tug likes all food, so there's not really a difference in the type of food. But what you can do is use a very low value food to lure your dog with, and then reinforce them with a high value treat for following the low value one. So my terrier Tug can be overexcited about luring and targeting, so I spend a lot of time getting him calmer. So what you might experience with your dog is that when you're doing luring or targeting, that the dog starts to get frustrated and growls, whines, barks, maybe goes for the target, so licks or nibbles at the end of the target or the hand that you're luring with, or jumps. So if you notice that your dog starts to do this, you need to calm your dog down before continuing, because what you can do is you can, by mistake, capture that behavior in the targeting behavior, and then if you have that behavior in the targeting or the luring behavior, then when you train a trick using targeting or luring, you can actually capture the frustration in the trick. So your dog can look frustrated, growly, whiny, while doing a trick that is associated with the frustration that was captured during the training of the trick. So I suggest anytime you see your dog get overexcited, go back a step. It's really worth it. So I'm using cheese now, and he gets really excited for cheese. So I'm just going to take it easy and go back to just training the luring and the targeting as a behavior, rather than trying to train some really cool trick all of a sudden. Yes. You can also practice your treat delivery. So I'm going to feed him the treat, but if he goes to bite my hand, I'm just going to take it away. I'm not going to use a marker, because if I say yes and then he bites and then I take it away, that's really confusing. So I'm just going to practice feeding him as a behavior too. So once he's taking the treat nicely, I'm then going to do a little bit of luring, yes. And then I'm going to put the treat on the ground, just to make sure that he doesn't nibble my fingers. Yes. And then I can go back to that game of taking the treat nicely now that he's a little bit more excited. Good job. For me, I like the distance between the dog's nose and the target or the lure to be within 2 inches. So it gives them enough room that they're actually thinking about what they're doing, rather than consciously trying to get their nose to touch the target continuously. If your dog is really overexcited when following a lure, you might want to play just a leave it game where you're holding the treats and you're getting your dog to practice some impulse control at first before beginning the game of moving the target. Good boy. You can see he's a lot calmer now. With Tug, I have to play this game pretty often, reinforcing him for the correct level of arousal when following a lure or a target, where other dogs of mine or clients, they don't have to work on this as much because the dog's not going to get as overexcited or frustrated by the target or the lure. So if you're using a target stick, I actually like to use a target stick with food in, so I can lure my dog with food in the target stick and click and reinforce from the end of the target stick. But if you don't, and you just have a ball or a cup that the dog targets with their nose, and you click and reinforce, some tips are, if the dog is going to bite the end of the thing, the end of the target, you can click before they get to it. So just even for looking at the target at a distance, anytime they look at it, click and reinforce back. If your dog is jumping up at the target, you simply just have to wait until they're down on the ground, move it a little, and click a step without jumping. If the dog starts touching up the target and not touching the actual end, I suggest going back to basics and training it where you're holding the target in your hand and making it very easy for the dog to be successful. So the target is pointing towards them, where if I have the target like this, obviously the dog's going to want to touch this part of the target rather than this part. So I'm setting the dog up for success by having the part that I want the dog to touch lined up with the dog. So if your dog jumps, it's very cute. But you're just going to wait till all 4 feet are on the floor to click and reinforce, and then next time I'm going to be faster so that I don't wait for him to jump before I reinforce him and create a behavior chain of jumping and then going down on the ground. Can't hear my clicker, can you? Target! 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 So if you have a dog that becomes disinterested when you're using targeting and luring and doesn't want to follow the target or just wants to wander off and sniff, you have to build their drive to follow the target or the lure. So you have to be more exciting. This isn't something that you're going to do with a dog that's overexcited about the target or the lure. So using really high value treats. Look, Splashes, what's this? Ooh, ready? Get it! Oh yeah! And tossing the treats, like that toss the treat game. So you're just extending the game where you're luring the dog with the treat. Maybe you're jiggling it a little bit. Woohoo! This is fun! Oh boy! And then throwing it. Hee hee! If your dog gets disinterested, stop and try again when they're more excited and keep the games short.
Step 2. Duration.
So once you've got step 1, which is building the correct level of arousal and also the correct distance from the target, you can then start proofing for duration. A lot of people don't think about this. You know, they train targeting and luring, and then they start to train tricks using that targeting and luring as a tool rather than thinking about it as a behavior. So if your dog can only follow a target for 5 seconds, and then suddenly you want to train heel work and you want to do 30 seconds of heel work using your target, it's almost like you're training 2 behaviors at once. The position and also the skill of targeting for 30 seconds because you never worked on that before. So I suggest proofing. So if you're going to utilize targeting to train another trick that has a lot of duration, I suggest training targeting or luring for double the duration of what you're going to train. So what I want you guys to practice is just being conscious of how long you're luring. Target. You don't have to have your dog follow it, target, in a straight line. You can practice moving your dog about with the target. Good job. Now, I said that I want you guys to practice duration, but you're going to practice it on a variable ratio of reinforcement. So you're not going to do 1 step and then a treat, and then 3 steps and then a treat, and then 5 steps and then a treat, and then a minute and then a treat. Your dog should never know when the treat's coming. So say if they're doing 30 steps, it's on an average of 30 that they're going to be reinforced. So maybe they'll get a treat after 3 steps. Maybe they get a treat after 30 steps, maybe they get a treat after 45 or 8 or 20. They should never know when they're going to get the treat. But at first, you really want to build the behavior to be so strong. So if your dog's only been luring for 10 seconds, you're not going to quickly bump it up to 30. Are you ready? Target!
Step 3. Add rules.
Step 3. Now you can add rules to your targeting or luring behavior. What do I mean by that? Well, it may seem obvious to you what you want your dog to do, but it makes it much clearer if you add rules. So what does it mean when you hold the target above the dog? Should they jump up and try to bite it? Should they walk on their back legs? Or should they walk underneath the target, looking at the target? What do you want your dog to do? Also, what do you want the dog to do if the target goes on the ground and moves? Do you want the dog to crawl, or do you just want the dog to look down? What do you want your dog to do when you move the target into your dog? Do you want your dog to back up, or do you want your dog to start spinning in a circle? Who knows? So you have to teach your dog these rules. Another really good one is teaching the dog a crossover. So teaching the dog to move from one target to another.
Switching from one target or lure to another.
Okay, so I'm going to put my clicker away and I'm going to use a marker word for this exercise, but I'm working on the skill of following one target and moving to the next, or following one lure and moving to another one. Yes. 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 Good boy.
Follow from below.
So if you have a little dog, you might want to try this. If you like using targeting, that's great, but sometimes maybe you want to use luring, but when you lure the dog, you don't always want to be bending over because it really hurts your back. And if you want to teach heel work, it's not very fun. So you can teach your little dog the rule that even though you're luring from above, it doesn't mean to jump for the treat. So to teach that, you start off luring in the way you usually do. Maybe you lean over and lure your dog, and then you gradually move the treat up. So you're clicking your dog for staying on the ground, even before you start luring, and then lure just a little bit, and then hold your hand up higher. And then increase the duration that your dog is doing the behavior.
Follow while standing up.
If you want your dog to stand up when they to follow a target, I suggest having a cue so that you do have the ability to fade targets and lures without the dog thinking that you're cueing them to stand up. So my cue for standing up is stand up. So while the dog's following the target, then you say stand up. Ready, Splash? Target! Stand up!